Welcome back. I'm playing Warhammer 40,000 Battlesector, and we'll continue on with our faction versus faction matchups here. Today I'm going to be discussing the Necrons versus the Khorne forces here. It's definitely a matchup that's hard in favor for the Necron units here, but I will explain why my thought process is there and kind of give you an example of an army build to use against that faction with my reasoning. But first, if you're enjoying these videos, please give my channel a like and subscribe to encourage me to post more content for you. And if there's a faction that you're really struggling playing against, just comment below in the video here, and I will try to make some videos about those faction matchups. If I don't get any recommendations, then I'll just kind of randomly go through different factions and try to complete them all, because a lot of newer players sometimes really struggle with building out some armies, because you need to have a pretty good understanding of what each faction can do and how they work to be able to then build something that counters against it. So good thing is the Necrons are exceptionally good against killing things like the Khorne forces. So the reason for that is any force that's going to be playing against the demons, you're going to have kind of two major objectives here. And this is going to be very similar to the Tyranids as well. If you're struggling against the Tyranids, is they're going to have a bunch of what I like to call swarm tactics. Now, I give it that name because the Tyranids are one of the original factions that were released, and then they have something called swarm tactics, which is when you have them all together, then they start getting increased accuracy and damage when they're grouped together. Now, something very similar can happen with demon forces, except it's with the blood letters, is they get increased critical hit chances, and then if you see a bloodmaster near them, then they're getting additional armor and armor piercing, if I remember correctly, within 2 tiles of that unit as well, and they can really start stacking things up. And then if they have a demon prince on top of it, they'll sometimes surround their units with that, so we can use the demon prince buff to increase melee accuracy and melee damage, and those things can stick around for a couple of turns until they'll kind of rotate those blood letters around to do the maximum amount of damage. And as you'll see, some of the Necron units can actually normally be very good and very durable because they have a lot of armor, but because the blood letters have so much armor piercing, especially if they start getting a bunch of crits stacked on and they get a 30% crit chance, they can start doing a lot of damage to you. And so it's all about killing them as much as possible before they can get to you. And then the flesh hounds, you'll want to avoid using real low tier infantry or a bunch of scarabs, because then the flesh hounds have a flamer attack that goes off every couple of turns, and that will allow them to do some AoE damage against you as well. So you got to just realize you got to take those guys out, and they have very low armor, so and we don't have any real true flamer units as the Necron warriors. You have to use something called Living Lightning, which is special weapons have this ability, and I'll go through it more as we go to units that have it, but effectively that gives your attacks a splash damage that can jump to adjacent units and help you clear out a lot of units, and also help you get a lot of momentum gains here as well, so that can work out to be highly effective. So as you're clearing those units out, they're likely going to mix in some skull cannons, and what those are heavily armored units that have good splash damage. They're fairly cheap artillery, but they also have a very powerful charge attack that they can do every 3 turns, I think. So you just need to be careful, because that'll do significant amounts of damage to your heavily armored units or help them assassinate your heroes as well. So you got to take that into consideration. And then after they use that ability, they're going to increase their damage reduction by 25% if they use that brass shield. So you don't want to focus a lot of your efforts killing them if they've increased or given themselves that major damage reduction, but that unit tends to have more armor. The blood crushers have medium tier armor, and then the heroes, which are what a lot of the chaos units are going to be spamming out, also have a decent amount of armor as well. So you're going to want guys that have a Living Lightning to be able to get as much splash going to kill as much as you can, but you also need to have units that have good armor piercing so you can snipe down those high value targets, because what's going to happen is every 3 turns the anything that's an HQ unit for the coordinate forces can effectively summon an additional unit, and I think that each one has 3 or 4 charges, so depending on how many turns you're going to be playing on your match, or God help you if you're doing an Exterminatus match with no ending turns, what'll typically happen is your opponent will just camp in the corner, make you come to them, and they'll just keep spawning units out, and any unit that's spawned on a Exterminatus mission does not give you points towards your total, so then all of a sudden you got to try to memorize which units the Khorne forces started with, so you focus on getting those kills and not focusing on the units that are being spawned in unless you have to. So it's definitely a war of attrition when you're playing against the coordinate forces, and you can just get past that war of attrition if you can snipe down the enemy leaders before they can spawn all those units down. And then obviously the HQ units also have abilities to buff, so like I mentioned earlier, something called a Bloodletter, or a Blade Master, I can't remember. God, you'd think after all this time I'd remember these names. They can increase armor piercing and also giving armor to the coordinate forces. The Bloodthirsters will give increased momentum gains, and then the Demon Prince, to give a buff, needs to actually use an ability as well. So just keep that into consideration. So you're going to want to focus fire down those units to weaken down the forces while killing everything in front of you to stop you from being able to move around and snipe the units you want to. Now, in the past, the Necron forces had major advantages against the coordinate forces, because effectively what you could do is focus fire down all their units that had good AoE. So, the Skull Cannons, the Flesh Hounds are kind of the 2 most common ones. If the Bloodthirster can use its Roar ability, that gives it some AoE damage, but that has a cooldown, I think, of every 3 turns, 2 or 3 turns. I'm pretty sure it's 3, but I'm not 100% sure. So what you could do is your tier 1 abilities to summon 2 Scarab Swarms, and so effectively, if you keep accruing all this momentum as you're getting more and more kills and suffering more and more losses, and you're having your reanimation protocol go, and what that effectively does is on these units here, once they die, there's a 40% chance of 2 models from each group resurrecting at 50% health. So that can happen once per turn, and like I said, it's a maximum of twice per turn, and it can only happen twice per turn. And so the following turn, if you haven't wiped them out, it resets, and so then you kill a model, there's another 50% chance that it reanimates. So generally, once you've got the 2 reanimations going, you want to squad wipe, but this is one of the few factions where you want to actually squad wipe them, so you don't get stuck in this perpetual cycle where they keep reanimating on you and you have to waste more and more attacks on them. But that's also one of the reasons that you're so powerful against the coordinate forces, is because they have to chop through all your units, and then they can keep reanimating on top of it, and if they don't have enough movement, then they can't get to you. So you can definitely create a very strong front line that way. But in the past, what I was getting at is with your tier 1 command ability, it allows you to summon in 2 Scarab Swarms, and because so many of the coordinate forces don't have armor, you would effectively get a double attacks, because you get a charge attack the first turn that they're summoned, so now you're getting 2 charge attacks with the Scarabs, and then if they weren't locked in, you could then move them to a rear and then do 2 more attacks, and then if they didn't have good AoE stuff, then the coordinate forces effectively didn't have anything that would allow them to kill the freaking Scarabs, and they would just be totally overwhelmed because they couldn't run away from the Scarabs, because they would do enough damage to actually kill the units. And if they tried to stay and fight, there would just be so many turns that they'd be attacking that they wouldn't kill enough models. So it just got totally out of hand. So ultimately it led the developers to really nerf how that tier 1 ability goes, and I don't know, I still have mixed feelings about it. I mean, there was nothing more frustrating than having, Scarabs get swarmed in on you and as taking out your leaders, and it was definitely very obnoxious at times, but it also, now you're spending your tier 1 ability, you're summoning in 2 units, and they're easily killed the following turn. The big reason I'm explaining this is because if you look at the description, it still has the old description, so you're thinking you're going to get 2 attacks per Scarab Swarm, and then it says suffer -1 AP the following turn, but you suffer that -1 AP on the turn they're summoned, so you're effectively only going to get a double charge attack, and you're not sure where you're going to get that double charge attack, at what angle, so you can't guarantee that you're going to be getting the rear attack. So it really nerfed that ability into the ground. So just be aware of that. So it's still okay against the coordinate forces because you can still lock a lot of units down and be a pain in the ass, but it's not nearly as devastating as it used to be. Your tier 2 command point ability allows you to summon do a battle strafing run on 2 units on the map and do medium tier armor piercing to it, so that can definitely be good to help you snipe out those bloodmasters that usually are going to be hiding behind cover for the most part, because that's who most players that are more experienced are going to have as their true HQ commander, since the bloodthirsters are going to be in combat trying to wreck your shit, and because they just have amazing damage output. So that can help you really annihilate those forces. And then as you start to get more and more kills, then they're going to perpetually get weaker and weaker. So just keep that into consideration. So with that information, now I'll kind of explain why I have a build like this. Now, I would say this is more of a, I wouldn't call it a meme build, but it's definitely one that I kind of like if I just want to have some fun. But if I'm doing the most competitive build, this would not necessarily be what I would recommend, but I'll explain why. But this is a great build if you're going to have a choke point map, and so I'll kind of go through that. So for the Overlord, I'll almost always bring an Overlord with me no matter what kind of matchup I'm doing, but I don't want him to be a warrior, so with his war scythe, you know, that's his default, and with this you can pretty much kill and wipe out almost any squad here, because each one of those attacks is getting 3 splash, so he's a major powerhouse here with that war scythe. But I'm actually going to kind of have him hide in the back here, so I'll give him the hyperphase glaive, and then if I need him to fight at the end, then I can, but that will reduce his cost by 35. And then if you want to be a ranged attacker, then you can give him the Staff of Light. But the big thing for the Overlord, why I like to bring him, is he's got phase shift. So if he's about to get attacked, you can do this and give him plus 15% evasion and then minus 10 damage received. And that'll last just the 1 turn. So now all of a sudden he's got 35 evasion. Importantly, every 3 turns you can summon a squad of Necron warriors, which will have the default Gauss flayers here. So that can be very nice to be able to just spawn these guys and camp on their stage of command point, or to help you kill units. Importantly, the main downside of the Necrons is a lot of their units are very slow. So if you end up using the command protocol, which is the default, it starts out on the protocol of Sensing Seasons, it'll give everybody within 2 tiles of your Overlord here an additional movement and an additional ranged armor. And once you start getting into engagements, you may want to transition it to the protocol of Unbending Will, which will then give you 100% momentum gains and 1 melee armor to everybody within 2 tiles of your Overlord here, to help you really clear out those guys or survive if they're engaging the Khorne forces in melee. And the other thing that makes this guy really good is for 1 AP, you can also have him teleport. So if they lock you down and you need to get him away, you can teleport out of there. Or alternatively, if there's a bloodthirster or something that's about to be killed but you can't quite get it, then just warp right behind them and then start attacking them from the rear to get the bonus damage and get the kill if you can. So that can, for all those reasons, the Overlord's always a great choice. And like I said, if you're going to be in a very choke point map, then the Plasmamancer can be absolutely fantastic. And the reason for that is these guys are really expensive. So if you're not going to have a choke point match, then you probably don't want to bring these guys, because they're not quite as good unless you're going to have a choke point. Because one, if you have a bunch of high value targets all grouped together, like a bunch of bloodthirsters or something like that, you can just drop this quantum orb, and what it does is anybody that's within 4 tiles, you're dropping on the tile you land the attack on, it does 112 to 150 damage with armor piercing of 6, and that has splash, so you can effectively squad wipe units. And then everybody within 1 tile of that will take 30 to 40 damage, armor piercing of 3, so that'll almost allow you to wipe out anything that's nearby. You could follow it up with the Harbinger of Destruction, which now allows you to throw out a AoE attack, dealing 45 to 60 splash damage, armor piercing of 4 with an 80% accuracy, and I think it has a range of 2 or 3. So again, if they have a bunch of guys blocked together, you can use that. You can use it every 3 turns. This you only have 1 ammo, but technically I think it's glitched. I don't think it's ever been fixed, but somebody correct me on that if it has. This has been patched out. But what you could do is cast this, get a bunch of momentum, get a couple kills with this guy, get him to surge, and then you could empower it. And even if you had already used the quantum orb, you get it back, and then you would get to use it a second time, and the empowered ability would be even more powerful, allowing you to do even more devastating damage. But the other reason this guy is really good against the Khorne forces is if you have a bunch of guys all grouped together protecting him, you throw down this Tesla weave discharge, and what happens is he gives an AoE buff to everybody within 1 tile of him, and effectively it reflects 50% of the damage back onto the attacker. So that can be huge amounts of damage. Let's say if it's a bloodthirster hitting you for 150 damage, or a bunch of bloodletters that are about to attack you. This effectively makes it so they can't attack you that turn unless they're willing to sacrifice themselves, because that's significant amounts of damage. And then he's a hover unit, so he can get away from them. His range attack actually has 3 splash, allowing him to do decent damage at range, but he also is an amazing melee combatant with the range or a splash of 3 too, so he can go toe to toe with most other HQ units. So for all those reasons, this guy's an amazing choice, assuming you have a good match for him. But if everything's real open, then obviously you're unlikely to have all your guys grouped together to be able to use the Tesla weave or get a good nuke on. And if that's the case, for those 250 points, instead of bringing him, I would rather bring a couple of Triarch Praetorians and then another Scarab Swarm, which would be much more cost effective and add some more killing power there. Alternatively, you could do a couple of Immortals and get a couple more Living Lightnings going. It just depends on your play style. I generally like to have the Praetorians because I can use them again to lock down the melee area here, making him forced to have to kill these guys to get to my other units, and then I can also use their gravity displacement packs to jump around and get behind the heroes to allow me to kill them too, or to just capture points and do backcapping. So that can be great. The other thing to realize is I kind of discounted the Scarab Swarms, but that is one of their major powers. Is it has a very good range on it, so you can just shoot out that Scarab Swarm and then move the Scarabs on the first turn. That will allow you to capture some points and stuff as well. Now, I really like the Annihilation Barge. It can take a bunch of hits, it'll get a bunch of kills, and then it'll end up getting to heal for a whole bunch as well, as long as you don't get it cornered, so you got to use it to kite. But the big thing is for the 200 points here, you get a very powerful Gauss Cannon that has 4 attacks, each one doing 37 to 50 damage with 6 armor piercing, and it'll usually hit 3 out of 4 of those attacks pretty regularly, so you're getting good damage against those summoning units that we discussed. And then every 2 turns you get the Twin Tesla Destructor to attack now, and this is effectively a 20 attack that has that Living Lightning. And how that works is every time it hits, it has a 25% chance to arc to an adjacent unit. So let's say you have a Bloodthirster here, here, then you're attacking here. You have a 25% chance for it to arc over to one of these units next to it and deal 70% of the damage. So that allows you to do significant amounts of damage if you're stacking up multiple Living Lightning attacks. And really attack everybody around there. So if there's somebody that's just barely alive, has a few HP, you're like, oh, I don't want to waste an attack on it. Well, have them attack somebody that's full health nearby, and then splash that damage onto them to help you kill. Obviously, if there's only one unit nearby, so if you're attacking here and there's one here, then you know all that splash will go there. It'll sometimes arc to different units depending on how many are nearby. So in that way, it can be a little bit unpredictable. This thing gets a minus 20 or minus 15% damage received. Just be cautious. It is a vehicle, so it explodes on death, and also is hover, so you can get across dangerous terrain. And then the other thing to realize is the more momentum Necron units get, the more they heal for. So you can, you know, do some hit and run tactics with this guy. It has 360 health, so it can heal for, you know, well over 100 health per turn, allowing it to really survive and be a real nightmare for your opponents to kill in melee, allowing you to effectively kite these guys in perpetuity, especially if you're able to throw a couple obstacles in there to stop them from charge attacking you. The Locust Heavy Destroyers, I tend to bring 2 of these guys out with the Gauss Destructor, because even though it has a base accuracy of 80, they tend to hit a lot more than what you'd expect, and that's guaranteed, you know, 160 to 220 damage against, you know, Bloodthirsters and other hero units. It allows you to quickly assassinate those guys before these guys can get killed. The big thing is when you have the medium tier units, which have more health and armor, only 1 unit from these ones can resurrect per turn. You can't have both of them resurrect because that would be way too powerful. So just keep that into consideration. I think Tomb Blades are really good against the Khorne forces, and again, I like to give them the Twin Tesla Carbine here, which is the Living Lightning weapon, and effectively at a range of 5 you can sit there and just kite units and do a bunch of damage. You can end up using the Nebuloscope, which will allow you to ignore 50% of the partial cover penalties and give you some range stability, allowing you to attack at more range, only suffering. So how that works, I guess I should always explain that. So how range stability in this game works is, you say it says +3. So if you look here, the Twin Tesla Carbine does 75 base accuracy at the optimal range. In this case, it's 4. And so every tile that's off of the optimal range, so let's say I'm attacking somebody at range 5, then the accuracy would fall down to 70, but it would actually be 73 base accuracy because of the ranged stability would make it so it only falls off 2 per tile instead of the 5 per tile. The other thing with these guys is after you attack, you can end up using this invasion engram. And I always thought this was kind of bugged because effectively, if you use it before you attack, then you're getting -30 accuracy. But if you attack and then use it, now the -30 accuracy doesn't matter because you've already done your attack, and now you got 20 evasion, so you bring the evasion up to 30. So I always thought that was kind of backwards that you could use that after you attacked, but you can, so definitely use that to your advantage. And then with this, you can only use it twice because this is considered ammunition here, but that can be really nice if there's somebody in partial cover, because now all of a sudden your accuracy is a lot higher. You're getting a lot of Living Lightning stacks, and able to then run away because you may be attacking at a little increased range here with increased stability. The big thing with these guys, though, is you just got to realize that they don't have the reanimation protocol. So some people prefer to go with a more infantry build and do more immortals because they have the chance to having the 2 resurrections. Just whatever your gameplay style is. I tend to like the Tomb Blades to help me capture points, have the hover ability, survivability, and then just attack with the Tesla Carbine. But again, it's your preference. And for the same reason that I was just discussing, I like to bring some Immortals, and I like to do the Tesla Carbine. Now, the big thing is these guys only have 1 armor piercing, so they're not going to be very good at killing, you know, Bloodthirsters and heroes, but they're just amazing, or Blood Crushers for that matter. But they're really good at taking out the low tier infantry, which are going to be a vast majority of the opponents. But let's say you're going to do 6 of these guys, you probably want to bring at least 2 of them with the Gauss Blaster instead, and then this is a pretty decent armor piercing of 4, so this will allow them to shoot and do pretty decent damage, probably somewhere between 50 and 70 if not more to most heroes. So that can definitely be a big boon for you because they have a base accuracy of 85, only falls off 5 per tile, and they have a range up to 8. So, and each one of these models has 3 attacks doing decent damage, so you definitely have some good damage output there. And then again, the Scarab Swarms are just real nice to soak up any Overwatch if they end up bringing out the Soul Grinder, which is very unlikely, or if they have a Demon Prince that's got his Overwatch Inferno Cannon Overwatch going, you can do that. But for them, or just to get a little bit of zone of control to force them to have to attack you. But for the most part, there's not a ton of Overwatch that you have to worry about against the Khorne forces, but bringing some of these guys around to just help you be just effectively a nuisance against your opponent definitely always works out well for you. So given all that here, the big thing is you also have to, you have a lot of good alternatives for your builds as well. For the reasons we kind of discussed, is sometimes you won't want to bring a Plasma Mancer, because if you don't have the right mat, then 250 points is, not always the best way to spend, especially if you're doing a 2,000 point matchup. Then that's a lot, especially if you're bringing, say, 2 of them. That's 500. That's over a quarter of your total army just to bring 2 of these guys out, so you just got to be very cautious with that. But the Royal Warden is a good option. He's got the Relic Gauss Blaster, which has 5 attacks. They have good damage output, good armor piercing, very good accuracy, so he'll be able to mop up weakened units for you for sure, and also do damage against the heroes. But more importantly, he has some very nice buffs for your units too. This one here increases the accuracy and critical hit chance per momentum. It stops them from getting suppressed. So if you wanted to, say, do a melee build, or you're sniping from range with your Gauss Heavy Destroyers and you're struggling landing some hits, then you'd throw that on them. But then you'd also want to probably use this Logic ability too. And what that effectively does is, I think it's everybody within 1 or 2 tiles of this guy gets plus 10 momentum, plus 10% bonus HP, and it lasts for 2 turns. So that can be real nice if you throw that on the Annihilation Barge, helping it get more healing, or if you're going to do the Lich Guard to hold the front line, then they'll have some bonus health, but again, I don't generally recommend that. It can also make these guys be a real pain in the ass to kill by giving them some extra bonus health too, because if they miss the attacks, then they're gonna have to chew through that more as well. But definitely a decent option. I tend not to bring in a lot on this matchup, but it is a viable option. If you're on a big open map, especially on an elevated position, then the Death Marks are excellent units to bring with. The reason being is they have 8 range, they have 80% accuracy, they can hit hard and snipe out the enemy leaders, especially if you use the Hunter's Mark ability, which increases their accuracy by 30 and their critical hit chance by 15%, effectively allowing you to almost hit at 100% if you're at decent ranges and not having major obstacles. They also have the dimensional translocation, which allows them to teleport. So let's say somebody just happens to get you into combat and locking you down. Well, just teleport out of the way and then move 3 movement, land another round of attacks on them, and then escape. So that can be a real pain in the ass for your opponents here when you're warping all around the map. The Triarch Praetorians, again, are somebody I like to bring regularly against the Forces of the Chaos, because they have both a decent ranged attack and a melee attack, and they also have the jump pack ability, and they have the reanimation protocols, making them sometimes a real nuisance to have to chop through, and making them pretty cost effective. I think they're more cost effective than the Lich Guard. These guys are usually excellent tanks. I really don't tend to use them, I should be honest, against the Khorne forces, because what's going to happen is if they have a Demon Prince or a Bloodthirster, they're going to just attack these guys and wipe them out. And because all the Khorne forces have enough armor piercing, that even at 6 armor piercing with going up to 7 with the shield and the 10% damage received, they're still able to kill these guys a little bit too easy. So I would rather just have a little less points spent and get more of these Praetorians, and then have all that mobility to help me out here. The units I'd recommend not bringing would be the Hexmark Destroyer. The reason being is, yes, he's good at doing damage to everything the Khorne forces are going to be able to bring against you, but he's also going to be overkilling things, and he really struggles at killing units that have lots of squad models, and that's going to be most of the Khorne forces. So he tends to just easily get overwhelmed, even when he's splitting his shots with the multi-threat eliminator and getting the critical hit chance. I just don't find that he pays for himself. Now, the Scorptex Destroyers, especially if you give them the Hyperphase Reblade, can be good. But again, these guys, because there's only 3 models and only one of them can get resurrected, is the Khornate infantry tend to kill these guys a little bit too easily, so I tend not to bring them as well. We talked about the Lich Guard already. I generally do not bring warriors. I did try to do some builds with the Gauss Reapers because they actually have surprisingly high damage output, and at a range 1, even if they're engaged, they still have pretty decent accuracy and can really mess things up. But you know, they're 70 points and I just struggle getting enough kills with them. So again, a little bit more and just go for the Living Lightning. You'll be summoning at least 2 of these during a match, assuming you have like an 8 to 10 turn match up here with your Overlord, so you'll still have some, but generally you'll just want to use stronger units to help you. The flayed ones, they seem like they should be really good, but again, because they have such low armor and low health, they tend to just get themselves chopped up. But if you were able to keep them alive, you could get a bunch of flesh hunger stacks on them, allowing you to do amazing damage because they have high damage output with their regular attacks. They have decent armor piercing. You can use the dimensional translocation to warp behind the demon forces and then get some rear attacks and try to get those stacked up. But for the most part, these guys just get themselves killed too much, so I tend not to use them. And then the scarabs we talked about already. Now your Khorne forces again are going to want to be stacking as many attacks as they can, so they're going to want to use blood crushers to charge through and do AoE damage on you. They're going to be using flesh hounds to try to flame down your low tier infantry, and when I say low tier infantry, it's going to be your death marks, warriors, and filleted ones. They're or your tomb blades as well. Or scarabs, obviously. Those are the ones that take the most damage from the flame. Otherwise, they're going to be attacking you in melee. And then the flame attack itself, you know, again, something that like an immortal that has 6 armor, or your Praetorians that also have 6 armor, or your vehicles, they just don't have enough armor piercing those flames to do enough damage. So as long as you're not letting them surround you with the bloodletters, you can get enough kills to kill them before they get to you. And then they're going to have weakened squad models, and so you just keep those weakened squad models next to you, and then they have to move all around to be able to hit you. So you just got to be a real nuisance and just kite them into oblivion, and then just mop them up at the end and stop them from summoning. So that's kind of the name of the game with these Necron units. Now obviously you're on big open maps, it's going to be advantage to you. If you're in close quarters, then you are going to have to start doing a little bit of guys to hold the line. So again, I tend to like Praetorians myself. I suppose, like I said, you could do some Lich Guard, but I tend to find that they just can't quite pay for themselves, whereas these guys can with all their jump infantry. And then just sniping them out, and then again, Living Lightning for the win for sure. But don't bring everybody as Living Lightning, or else you're just not going to be able to kill the summoners, and then you're going to get yourself overwhelmed. So you throw in a couple of these Locust Heavy Destroyers, Annihilation Barges, they'll allow you to have the damage output that you need. If you're worried you're not going to be able to get enough killing with these guys, then again, you cancel out some of the Annihilation Barge and bring more of the infantry and just win by sheer firepower. The higher points you have, the less likely I am to bring the Annihilation Barges and try to get more to help me get as many kills as possible, because they're like the Tyranids that, especially on the higher point matches, they're going to bring so many units out that it's going to be very overwhelming. So you're going to need to focus on getting a lot of those kills so you don't get yourself into that situation. So I hope that helps you fight the Khornate forces. The big thing that I forgot to mention is what your Khornate opponent is likely going to do is they're likely going to spam their tier 1 ability on you. And that is definitely a pain in the ass when you're playing as the Necron forces, because it's going to lower your movement by 1. It also lowers your accuracy, and it has a pretty big area of effect, so, and it lasts for a couple of turns, so that really hurts you with your units and your damage output. So just be aware that he's going to do that. If you have units that you're getting close to being able to surge, he could also use his ability to soak up your momentum. I think it drops it by like 50%. And the Bloodthirster can also use his roar ability to make you lose some of your momentum as well, so just be aware of that. And then at tier 3, you don't want to, so near the end of the match, you don't want to have everybody grouped together, because he's got a powerful tier 3 ability that I think has a 4x4 or a 5x5 area of effect that does psychic damage, doing 37 to 50 damage. And so that can really hurt your infantry if they're all globbed together. So just be very aware by the end of the match to not have everybody in one area, or he'll just cast that ability and then mop you up with the rest of his forces. So I just wanted to mention those command point abilities, because sometimes I can catch you off guard, and for sure that darkness ability for the chaos is a real pain in the ass for the Necron warriors, because you have no way of really canceling that out. Now, the one advantage you have is if you've struggled against the Fleshhounds with other factions, they're nerfed against the Necrons, because they can't do they can only do a regular charge attack. They can't do their special ability charge attack, because that's only effective against organic units, and none of the Necron units are organic, so they can't, that whole ability doesn't even affect them. So just keep that into consideration. So thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe. Encourage me to post more content for you. Have a great day.